Hello and welcome back to the Undercut podcast. We are back to review the fourth Grand Prix of the year, the Miami Grand Prix. I'm your host, Jesse Millington, and joining me once again is none other than Mr. Thiemo Albers-Daly. How are you, and have you been enjoying your bank holiday weekend, your earlier Grand Prix, your thunderstorms, and your Formula 2?
I have, and I got some horse racing in there for good measure as well. Saturday's version, because Sundays didn't happen because that was cancelled because everything else was brought forward by donkey's years. So not too bad on the whole. How are you?
Yeah, doing pretty good. It's been a busy bank holiday weekend, catching up with some friends, a winery tour, caught the Formula 2 feature race, caught the sprint race, fell asleep during that for Formula 1, and enjoyed the Grand Prix, actually. It was a very good outing in Miami, all things considered. A bit jumbled, a bit tricky.
Beginning and the end, certainly. Middle, less interesting, but...
But we've had that with previous seasons, to be fair, where the start is good when everyone's on fresh tyres and jousting, and then it dies down a bit, and then it comes alive at the end as all the tyres start failing, and it really depends on who's held onto their tyres. So that's familiar ground. So we're heading in the right direction.
Familiar but frustrating feels like the theme for this episode.
Yes.
Could be.
Yeah. There's a lot that we've seen before, and I think we're seeing it return, but in a positive light.
We've got questions.
We've got questions, but we're happy with the progress. Obviously, we've got a bit of a gap until Canada, so we'll rattle through a little bit of news before we get into the main meat of this podcast. And of course, one of the big things this weekend was the sad passing of Alex Zanardi. A lot of the teams were running tribute decals on the cars for him. I think Ferrari had one on the halo saying "Ciao, Alex." I know that Williams had one, just sort of, I think it was "Thank you, Alex" across the nose cone. So it was nice to see that touch being made. 44 Grand Prix from the Italian driver from the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix through to the 1999 Japanese Grand Prix, as well as 2 IndyCar championships, 1997 and 1998, which included 15 wins, 28 podiums, and 10 pole positions, as well as winning 16 gold medals across the Paralympics and World Championships of Paris cycling. Genuinely one of those wonderful characters that comes from Formula 1 and motorsports in general, becomes that inspirational sort of person for so many, and just absolute loss to see him gone so early.
Did you see Mario Andretti's post and tribute to him? Because there was a lot of that style of tribute to him over the weekend, where it was more, we're going to look back in fondness at some of the funnier moments rather than be too sad and mopey about it, because that's not what he would have wanted. And Mario's stood out to me in particular because of the story he had. I think you might have pulled it up there, have you?
Yeah, it was this brilliant quote from Mario Andretti. In the game of life, Alex Zanardi left nothing in the tank. I remember when he asked me to write the foreword for his book. I asked him, anything you want me to say? He said, well, I need to order new legs. How tall do you think I should be? And I think that is the perfect encapsulation of that sort of just effervescent next step spirit of Zanardi, just sort of never let anything wash over him.
Very Monty Python, Black Knight kind of, yeah, I don't know my legs, so what? Come and get me. I'll still fight you. So and he proceeded to go and do that and then get 16 gold medals for his efforts. Not there going.
As well as, was he also in, I think he was in like a GT series as well with an adapted car.
Yeah, there was so much on the various wiki pages and other places I was looking to try and see how to try and surmise the records in a short order, and I'm going to have to just cut some of these, unfortunately, because there's just so much that he did do.
Yeah, just one of those sort of sparkling characters. I think he also brought the donut celebration to IndyCar and sort of popularized it as well in the 90s. It was just, again, I think the best clip of him has to be that pass at Laguna Seca. Was it on Brian Herter in the 90s, where he just absolutely sent one into the corkscrew chicane. And just one of those moments where you go, that's a tenacious racer and someone who knows, loves, and thrives in motorsport, and one of those characters that motorsport lives and dies by. And yeah, his passing.
Driver's driver.
Yeah, a driver's driver, and a great sadness in his passing. In other news, sort of similarly though, IndyCar, news from Romain Grosjean and Mick Schumacher. Romain Grosjean killed a bird during the Indy 500 testing, and PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, are not happy. He collided with the bird at about 230 miles an hour and had a fairly nonchalant response. The Animal Welfare Organization, which reportedly kills 2,000 animals a year on average, are sending him some vegan chicken nuggets. Meanwhile, Mick Schumacher revealed that in his incident back at St. Petersburg, he lost a chunk out of his left wrist. He had that awkward moment going into the barriers early on, and sort of wheels spun in his hand. Easy to sort of smash and shatter your wrist there. So he's not really been performing as well as he would have liked, as he's relying a lot on his right hand at the moment and will need surgery post-season. Hopefully he can go and see the same people that did Lance Stroll's wrist, as well as they do a lot of the MotoGP guys as well. They just sort of seem to be a whiz at rebuilding all the tiny bones that make up your wrist and lower hand.
Yeah, I saw that and went, that explains so much of your season so far, because I've been wondering what's been going on there. Because you look in practice and in qualifying some days, especially back in Phoenix, and he was phenomenal. But then something happens, and I'm going, this isn't him. There must be something more here. Like, is it the car? Is it just bad luck? Does he need to go and see an exorcist? No, it's because part of his hand's literally missing. That would explain some things when you're trying to drive an Indy car. That makes sense now.
Has he said what bone it is that's sort of been obliterated?
Not in the interview I saw.
Yeah, because I know that motorcyclists and cyclists, when they come over, because of the way that you put pressure through your hand, you often end up doing the one that's on the inside of like the pad of your thumb. It's called your scaphoid. Really common in motorcycling injuries, where you sort of come over and you basically smack your hand down there. The pressure and the shockwave goes into that bit. I've done that one. I can tell you it's bloody painful. So I don't
think he was recommending it. Don't worry.
No, certainly. I also do not recommend it. And I can understand the possible sort of aches and pains that Mick Schumacher is feeling, especially trying to put the load of an IndyCar steering rack through his hands at 230 miles an hour around a banked circuit. So not comfortable. Meanwhile, race organisers for the Miami Grand Prix will have been feeling a little bit uncomfortable coming into the weekend, as local law, I think, I can't remember if this is Florida specific, Southern state specific, or nationwide in America, but you're unable to run a major event, sporting or otherwise, if I think it's lightning is within 8 miles of the event.
Mm-hmm.
So to try and avoid...
I think it might be an American thing generally, because I know IndyCar had an issue with that a couple of years ago. They had to delay the start of the 500, didn't they? Because of lightning in the area.
Yeah.
Wait for clouds to pass by.
I think that was not last year before, 2024.
Yeah, 24. Did I say 24? Yeah.
You said a few years ago. I think, you're close enough. I think I had a vague memory of it, because I know last year was the Oscar Mayer Wiener hot dog race, which was good fun. Yes. But I don't remember that being impacted by rain. It was the year before, because there was also
to be honest, I don't think that would get impacted too much by rain anyway.
No, I think you can fit wet tires to an Oscar Mayer Wiener. But anyway, can't run a major sporting event or public event within 8 miles of active lightning storms. So they moved the event 3 hours earlier to try and avoid essentially run it all before the lightning arrives, which is a sensible move. Obviously means they can get a race underway and hopefully run it to its completion as well. We don't have anything being red flagged because of rain. F2 was also moved earlier. We had that brilliant wet feature race that's just barely became a dry for the final lap, if you weren't John Bennett, one presumes. Really good stuff there. And again, I think great showing from Formula One, being sort of very active, trying to get these races to go ahead, trying to avoid that sort of Belgium 2021, where we had half points awarded for a race that was 3 laps under a safety car. Really good stuff there. However, if they're moving the F2 earlier still, worth pointing out that a lot of people didn't get to watch any of the F2 action because it all started before they opened the gates to the grandstands and the circuit.
The grandstands were very empty, let's say. There were people in the grandstands, but nowhere near enough that you'd be expecting to. It wasn't the time difference, I think, was some of the things we've seen for F2 and F3 before, where it's like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, and, well, we don't blame you for not being next year, still hungover probably from the night before. This was a reasonable time of day for it, but surprising absence of people. But that would also explain it.
I think local time it was about 10 a.m, but weirdly enough, the gates to the circuit didn't open till 9:30. So by the time people have or the car park didn't open till 9:30. So by the time people had actually sort of made it in, most of the Formula 2 had happened, which is mad considering at Silverstone, for the amount of British Grand Prix I've been to for Saturday, where you often have F1 Academy, F2, F3, bunch of feature races, display laps. The grandstands are always, there's always people in the grandstands for F3, and for F2, people are usually sat for F2, ready to watch it in anticipation of a good sprint. It's just unfortunate that the first time Formula 2 goes to America at this circuit, you have Colton Herta racing in his home race in Formula 2, and no one gets to see it in person just because of this weird thing of, even on the Saturday, when it wasn't moved early or anything, it just smacked of bad organising or bad preparation from the event hosts. I appreciate they took this on last minute, but even then, you would have thought they'd have been able to open the gates a bit earlier. I don't know. It just, yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be a bit of a post-mortem done there, I think, for the race organizer, because after that weekend of Formula 2, you'd be surprised if there's not at least conversations about adding Miami to the 27 calendar next year. It was one of the better Formula 2 race weekends, race-wise, that we've seen for quite a while. Two very, very different races, but two very action-packed races regardless. So if they do come back to Miami next year, they'll want to sort that out.
Yeah, there'll be some tweaks to be made, certainly to the timings. While we're getting into sort of the general racing analysis, moving from Formula 2, which was very good, to Formula 1, qualifying was a lot more pushing, which is what we anticipated seeing. Obviously, they've changed the harvesting and power regulations around the electrical power units, giving drivers a chance to be more on it, more at full throttle around a lap, and therefore taking the car to the limits of its braking, its tyres, its chassis, its handling. But we're still seeing the cars unable to recover enough energy to race to the end. We saw a very dead middle section of the Grand Prix where drivers were just sort of lying astern, having all run out of energy. Once all the cars get down to the same electrical wattage, it very much gets flat and it shakes out to its natural order. But there was that brilliant finish, though, as it really depended on who had been able to save their tyres through that process. And that became the huge thing. And obviously, McLaren, having made some technical changes over the spring season, always a team that seems to be good at running on their tyres, just left Norris and Piastri with a bit more rubber to tackle things at the end. But again, Miami has that huge back straight leading into, what is it, turn 17? You have that sort of one, you come out from the clumsy chicane under the underpass and along essentially the drive. And if you watched any of the cars while they had the data up on the Halo, you could see the speed tailing off before they even got to the braking zone as the clipping started to come in. So again, you're reaching that braking zone slower, you're not having to push the car, you're not having to push the brakes as much. It's still not quite perfect. And again, when we get to the likes of Baku and Monza, where you've got those huge straights, it's not going to be, Spa as well. It's not going to be that huge dive. And again, when it comes to the racing as well, it's not going to be that huge dive on the brakes because your car will have already half dived onto the brakes for you. Again, we're going to lose that racing coming off the Camel Straight, coming off even Wellington Straight at Silverstone or Hagger.
I was going to say, not even just that at Spa. You've obviously got the main straight when you come up, but also the back part coming up to bus stop chicane, essentially, is still what I'm always going to call it. There's a corner, but you're still pretty much flat out through that whole sequence there. So that's going to be interesting to see at what point does that in there as well to have it. So I think everywhere else we've been to so far, we've only really had it in one place, maybe two in Japan with 130R depending, but we won't have had it as much as we would have done it somewhere like Silverstone, Spa, Austin, even as well. You've got the front straight there, the long back straights. So it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out. Yeah, and again, like you said earlier, we're moving in the right direction with it, but I wonder at what point, when we've had one or two Grand Prix venues like that, are we going to see more speakers potentially come into it and go, that's not ideal, really.
Yeah, I think especially with the fact that with Spa, it's going to be very interesting because those are technically turns. So whether or not they'll be allowed to be super flipping through that section, because you essentially come through, was it Le Fagno, Piff Paff is the sort of final one of those chicanes as you come down the hill, and then it's Campus Paul Frere, which is sort of the double right-handers, and then you're into Blanchimont, which is a blindsided left that drops away from you a little bit. That's incredibly high speed through there. If you've got to come up on a car that's, again, much like we saw in Suzuka,
and we've seen people in different eras have enough issues with it as it is. I mean, Giovinazzi and whoever it was a few years ago absolutely smashed the car to pieces going through there. Yeah. Losing it without that issue.
Pool, I think, but yeah, it's.
But again, that's a pretty flat out part of the section if you get it the right way. And well, he both got it in the right way and the wrong way on that occasion. But you see where I'm going with that.
Yeah. There's essentially, once you've done sort of
Spa could be interesting.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a map of Spa through it and thinking there are so many moments where it's going to go so badly wrong because you'll hugely charge the batteries you go through Le Col.
Depending on how close they are at the end of lap one, that start-finish straight going down into turn one is going to be dangerously Grosjean 2012 territory, isn't it?
Yeah, I think not. Yeah, there's going to be a problem there if you haven't charged up properly and you get off the grid badly. Someone's going to pile into one another, as we have seen previously. And equally, at the end of lap one, obviously, I think you're going to have a huge charging moment when you're on the brakes into Le Con, Malmedy, even Bruxelles as well, which is tight and sort of it requires you to.
Most of the circuit is what we're getting at here.
Yeah. But then as soon as you get through Jackie X, I think it used to be called Speaker's Corner or something, that's a big downhill left-hander before you get into the double left of Pouhon. If you start super clipping coming through Pouhon and someone else isn't, that's where we saw Schumacher into the back of Coulthard in the wet. That's without super clipping, you can have a big accident there.
History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme.
Yes.
We may see a lot of rhyming.
This may be a very sort of poetic season in terms of its rhyming couplets. But anyway, we'll move into the team-by-team analysis to see who's done the best coming out of Miami. And it is Mercedes that still leads. Russell qualifies fifth, finishes fourth, while Kimi Antonelli converts his third qualifying session in a row into a pole position and then sets a complete record by converting his third pole position in a row into his third win in a row, something that's never been done before, and to do his first 3 wins back-to-back, his first 3 poles back-to-back, and all of them tied together. It's just one of those things that somehow hasn't been done before. I think it puts him in the same record books as Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher. There's other people on that list.
Put him in the same category for all those, and then he went and won Miami and put himself in a class of his own.
Yeah,
essentially.
A class of his own is the only way I think you could accurately describe Antonelli for about 98% of the weekend. It's just the starts at the moment that are the problem.
But that doesn't seem to matter too much. It's keeps the race interesting at the start, at least, because you go, okay, let's see how far ahead we can get before he comes back at it. And it's interesting how that happens more with him than it does with Russell at the moment. That's quite interesting. So obviously in Australia, Russell didn't have a problem with that at all and was able to come back and fight back pretty quickly. Ever since then, not the case. I think the only saving grace for me at the moment is that the start of the season is mirroring last season a bit with Piastri and Norris. And this may be a bit of wishful thinking too, but Piastri obviously ran away with it quite a bit in the first part of the season. We were thinking, wow, okay, Piastri, we knew he was good. We're finally getting him to realise that now. He's showing Norris how it's done in the way that, yeah, you're not the new kid anymore, Norris. You had the chance to kind of capitalise on this and you missed out. Piastri's here now. And then in the second half of the season, Norris finally remembered to wake up and get going. And Max and Red Bull managed to figure some stuff out and brought it in really interesting. I'm wondering if Tony can't sustain this momentum, because again, we're heading into part of the season now. We're after Canada. That was his worst patch last year, the European leg of the season. Will Russell be able to overcome that, resurrect his title hope slightly? Will Leclerc and Ferrari and Hamilton, for that instance, be able to come back into it? Bring McLaren, obviously, Piastri into it as well. Do we then get a bit of a mirror image for last year? Again, yet another way to rhyme for history gone by. And it gets a lot closer, because at the moment, no, it's only race 4, but it's feeling a bit too dominant, a bit too soon. And as impressive as it is, not taking anything away from Antonelli, as a neutral, you don't really want to see that, because you were, again, promised new regulations, new everything. It's going to completely switch things up, and we've basically gone back to 2014. But it's Lewis immediately there and doesn't have, at the moment, a Nico Rosberg to keep him honest, because Russell's all the way back and forth. And what's interesting on that one for me is that mirrors the IndyCar season at the moment. You know, P4 from a starting position of P5, not bad, respectable, perfectly good. But when your main competitor is Alex Palou or Kimi Antonelli, who's finishing first or second in every single race, that's not good enough. You've got to beat the guy. So I don't know don't know what else he can do aside from just try and find a way to not make any mistakes whatsoever and hope that Kimi does. But hope, as Ferrari have proven many times, is not a good strategy.
No, it's yeah, Antonelli's flying pace is absolutely stonking. Like when you get him up to speed and just let him go, the
Mm.
reliability of him to pump in pace into a car is astounding. It's his race starts that are bad, and I don't think it's it's not a mechanical thing because Russell seems to get that Mercedes off the line quite well, is the thing. He puts the pressure onto him early. And Verstappen is struggling with this generation of car too. So that alleviates some of the concerns, especially if you look at this weekend. They both had problems coming off the line. The Ferrari further exaggerates the visuals of that because of its smaller turbocharger. It builds boost better. It puts its power down really well. It doesn't bog down in that second phase of starting. But so I think Antonelli's got a little bit just to patch up. That's why I said this. So he's 98% absolutely untouchable. And yeah, I think that that obviously that second phase of the start bit both of Verstappen and Antonelli very hard into turn one, costing Verstappen more than it did Antonelli. George able to race past Piastri as well. The Mercedes is still a very raceable car from within the field and able to outpace the McLaren quite visually. It was Antonelli's ability to then rebuild, refocus, put Charles Leclerc under that pressure, force him to use his tyres, force him to use his battery, and then rely on his team to be able to pull the strategy around him as well. That meant that when it came to it, Mercedes were able to pull that undercut on Norris, which catapulted Antonelli into the lead, and then was just able to, again, use his ability to just feed in pace, 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 just bang in those laps. And that late race pace and his stability is really solid. And it means that he can keep the tyres under him. He can keep a bit of battery under him. And it's enough to keep Norris
I
at bay.
do wonder if you'd had Russell in that position instead of Antonelli, would we have seen a closer fight for the win in the end? That's again a fun implied what if, because just based off what we've seen with Russell ever since Australia, he's just not seemed as on it, whereas Antonelli hasn't really made a mistake, like you say, aside from at the starts. But even then, he just manages to get himself in the zone, and we go.
I have a response for you on that, and I'm gonna say a line that I don't like. I think Russell on a good day would be able to hold Norris at bay as it stands.
Why don't you like that?
Because at the moment we're not seeing Russell on a good day. We're not seeing that sort of
No, but that's good because it means that he's still got potential. He's not maxed out yet.
no,
He's not
but
suddenly just found his limit. That means there is still potential in him.
there is potential in him. However, when you think back to last season before, Russell was Mr. Consistency. He was able to bring the same performance weekend after weekend. And we're not getting that same performance from him weekend after weekend at the moment. I don't know if it's struggling to come to terms with the car or what it is, or if it's the pressure within the team. But there's something that's hampering his ability to be that level of top performing consistent. This is the guy that took the fight to Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. Like, we know he is a class driver when it comes to wheel. He is able to pump in those sort of incredible qualifying times. He was Mr. Saturday for so long. Like,
You say this about the consistency, but he still hasn't finished lower than fourth in any race.
yeah,
So it's he is still being consistent, but it's just Antonelli's consistency is better,
better. Yeah. And I don't
which is goes back to the Pelot problem. It's like it's great to be in the top five every race again, but when your competitor is going
the top
second,
one.
first,
Yeah.
the maths just isn't going to be in your favour.
Yeah. It's
So
just
he's got to find a way to unlock the extra consistency, which I think because of the fact that as you say, he beat Hamilton for a couple of seasons. The arguably one of the greatest drivers of all time. He's thinking Antonelli's going to be good, but he's not going to be Lewis.
I mean,
And he's just coming into his second season and going, "You're right, I might be more dangerous," which is slightly concerning for everyone going, "Please, not another one of these dominant runs for a few years."
yeah, and equally it's not uncommon for competent and comfortable drivers to underestimate hugely rookies coming into their team. Look at what Fernando Alonso had to put up with when Lewis Hamilton arrived on the scene at McLaren in 2007.
Best example of that.
Yeah, it's you think, oh, this rookie coming out of Formula 2 straight or GP2 straight into the team. I'm coming off the back of 2 back-to-back championships at my most dominant and best performing level ever. And
those podiums immediately.
Yeah, and this kid's got you hitting the bricks. You're like, what's gone on? it's one of those moments where you, again, like we said when we were talking about the quality of racing and where we might see some crashes and incidents this season, history never repeats itself, but it does often.
Canada's up next.
Yeah.
Didn't see anything there last year, did we?
Yeah, Canada last year was, oh, what, Antonelli with his maiden podium in Mercedes and sort of the Wunderkind set to replace Hamilton.
A moment
Sure.
then mirroring McLaren last year.
Yeah. It's lining up for something incredibly spicy. I think I'm trying to, as a journalist, remain sort of not ambivalent, but neutral for the sake of my reportage. But I really like George Russell. I think there's something really special in him as a racer. And I
I think
don't
just for the sake of the competition, you don't want to see anyone run away with it.
this early
Just
on.
because we're
Yeah.
so used to that, we've seen it so many times now. It would just be nice, regardless of who then ends up on top, just to see it be close. It doesn't matter if it's George or if it's someone else. We just want that tight battle. That's why the second half of last season was so interesting. Why so many people who wouldn't necessarily be Verstappen fans were kind of going for Verstappen because they thought, what a story that would be if he managed it. It's
Mm.
not necessarily dislike of Norris. It's just going, this is much more interesting than Norris just running away.
Yeah, I want there to be a good battle, I think is more what I'm sort of
That's all
erring.
we ask for. If we can't have all
Yeah.
the teams in there, just give us at least 2014 Hamilton or Rosberg beating two shades of various manure out of each other.
Yeah. We'll see how it pans out. And I mean, it's not like we're lacking teams at the top at the moment. We've got functionally four teams again squabbling for the podium weekend out in, weekend out.
It's just
Alpine,
that top step.
yeah, Alpine are in a very positive no man's land of a fact that they're pretty much always
They're
guaranteed
doing a Williams from
seventh.
last year at the moment.
Yeah, they're just like, we'll leave you guys to duke it out. We'll just sort of pick up the middling
We're
points
happy
at the
with
back of
fifth.
it.
Look where we were
Yeah.
last year. We're not going to be too cheeky about this.
Yeah, and it's great because it does now open up sort of the real bottom end, those final 2 or 3 points paying positions, really, for an interesting scrap for essentially F1.5, ignoring sort of the Formula One racing powered by Alpine in the middle and then the top three. It's funky. I like it. Meanwhile, second place, one of those teams scrapping for the top of the leaderboard, Ferrari. Hamilton qualifies sixth, finishes sixth. Leclerc qualifies third, finishes what? Fifth on track, sixth on track was he, and ultimately is demoted to P8. Yeah, Lewis was not prepared to fight Colapinto like that. Don't think he saw that one coming at all from an Alpine. And Charles, with a blinder of a start, really good heads-up racing in that opening phase. His ability to spot the gap, to put drivers under pressure, and Verstappen crumbling under the pressure is not something we've seen before or seen in a long time. Great recovery from that spin two from Charles Leclerc, limped it home like a soldier. And again, having bought an upgrade package the weekend, you would have expected a bit more from Ferrari, dare I say. The tyres got away from Leclerc as they went off the cliff. That was what caused his spin. Hamilton was battling damage as well, so it's not hugely representative of a weekend. But Leclerc's penalty, though logical, is a bit
Logic was a bit of a
nonsensical.
stretch at the same time,
I
though, I
think,
think. The
yeah, that's
nonsensical nature of it outdoes the logic of it.
yeah,
Because you think, well, if you're using logic, you would just go, no,
yeah.
that was stupid.
He lost out on those
Um,
positions anyway. He lost out on those positions to Verstappen and Russell, which are ultimately the
but
two
the
people.
penalty was driving into the wall and limping back home without losing too many more positions.
Yeah, he'd already lost 2 places in the
Mm.
process of trying to finish. He kept out the way of people who were still trying to actively have a race, which is good, and brought it home safely without causing a further incident. I don't get why we're penalising him for it. Yes, he went off track a lot, but ultimately he still lost those 2 places. He did not gain an advantage from any of what he did.
Yeah, no,
Ah,
it baffles me so much. Hamilton's well, I think all things considered, not bad. Sixth after essentially having just an Alpine drive into you is not too bad. How that is fine to do apparently, but Leclerc gets penalised beyond me. Not representative of what they're capable of. Again, it would be nice to see one way or the other. I don't know what I want for Canada. Do I want a dry weekend so we can see what Ferrari are capable of, or do I want to see a wet race so that we can get Hamilton in his element and go, sod it, let's go for it and see. Because again, as much as we joked in the preview about Miami being the kind of perfect place for Hamilton to get his first win with Ferrari, just because that'd be such a Miami thing to do, Canada, very appropriate for many reasons. Not just because of Antonelli last year, but also going back to in his own history.
Mhm.
Leclerc's pit stop, though, I thought was also a bit questionable on the timing front, and I'm trying to quietly manifest Hannah Schmidt's turning up and sorting that out.
Yeah, it wasn't a great point in time. Obviously, they
Again, I
ran.
did like Leclerc's team radio afterwards, like, can you consult me about this? I am also here.
Yeah, I can tell
Again,
you how the
having
car's
to remind Ferrari you have a driver in the car, maybe make use of them when making these sorts of
Yeah.
decisions.
It wasn't a great pit
It's an
stop
ideal.
either, at the same
No,
time. So yeah, there's a few bits for Ferrari to try and sort of work on again in the sort of what have we got 2 weeks off before we go back to Canada. So yeah, a little bit for them to work on. We'll move from Ferrari to McLaren. Piastri qualifies seventh and finishes third. For every race he finishes on the podium at the moment, which is good. Norris qualifies fourth, finishes second. Again, a good sort of climb up the ropes for both of them, really.
yeah, Piastri, brilliant recovery really for him after a subpar qualifying, considering where we thought he would be. Quite hilarious to think that seventh is a bad qualifying performance for him, considering how the season started for him. But I guess that's just the fun nature of him at the moment. Not much else to say really. I think on McLaren they just they brought upgrades. They came along. The upgrades actually worked, and Miami is a strong circuit for Norris. He always likes that. Yeah, there's really not much to say on them. They just showed up, did the job, and got out again.
Yeah, just one of those sort of clean performances as a team.
Even Zach Brown wasn't especially talkative on the commentary. He just sort of had very little to say, refreshing. And then we went back to watching the race. Okay, let's go. Let's get on with that.
Yeah, car looked a lot more raceable. I think they've made a huge step over the spring break. They're putting the pressure on Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull more consistently now. Yeah, Norris looked competent this weekend. His sprint drive was really solid as well. Just sort of no fuss there.
In the clean air was king.
Yeah,
Once you're out in front,
yeah,
and you can stretch your legs a little bit, especially if the people are fighting each other behind. You're sorted.
Yeah, with again, much like Will Joseph told Lando in the opening stint of the race, leave them to yo-yo back and forth, save your battery for a little bit later, and sort of push through. Which he did, to be fair. What he did not counter was Antonelli pitting into free air and having an absolute sort of worldy of an outlap. I think, wasn't it, that Antonelli just sort of came out and just sort of blitzed it, and McLaren just could not respond to it. But yeah, very cautious with their strategy, which maybe cost them the win in that similar manager. But at the same time, a double podium.
Considering where they started their season, you'll just take that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, McLaren always seem to do this, certainly in recent years, as fumble a new regulation set. They did it coming into 2022, I think, where they
They did it in 2014.
Yeah.
The first great patch, and then we don't talk about that.
Yeah, well, 2022, they sort of absolutely stuffed it in Bahrain, the opening round. And then they've picked up from 2022 through the rest of the season. They sort of really found their feet again. And 2024, even, they did not have a good start. And then obviously Norris locked in, got that first win in Miami. And McLaren were able to start putting pressure onto Red Bull, ran away with the constructors. McLaren's ability to find out where they're going wrong and turn it around is impressive. And I think if this is the first hint of that once again, I think we're on for a very interesting constructors battle. And Ferrari might just be a small speed bump in the way for McLaren to surmount before charging at Mercedes. We'll see.
As long as we get some kind of a battle. Just want a battle at the front.
Just want a battle for that top tier. We'll see how it goes. Meanwhile, Red Bull Racing have overcome a couple of speed bumps on their Constructors' Championship climb. Verstappen qualified second, finished fifth. Isaac Hadjar would have the unfortunate double incident of a DSQ and a DNF. Technically, he qualified all right-ish. I think he was in the top 10, if my memory serves me well.
I already have forgotten. It's
happened
many months ago to me. So
I feel like he qualified 8th off the top of my head. But then was disqualified.
Doesn't matter now.
Doesn't matter because he had 2 millimeters of floor in the wrong place and as a result was disqualified. Started from the pit lane and then would DNF after clipping the wall on the entry to that clumsy chicane and then just sort of barreling.
Something I'm surprised we don't see more often, quite frankly. And I mean, I know we don't get too many support races there that we see in single seater. You didn't really see it in the Porsche racing, although, remind me, watch it later, hilarious moment at the opening of that race. But F2 and F1 Academy, when we've seen them race there, it's very nip and tuck, and there's a couple of corners like that elsewhere on the calendar, and you're always surprised that more incidents don't happen at these kind of places. And they just managed to get away with it every time, but Hadjar was not one of them this weekend. I think it's safe to say it wasn't his weekend. Verstappen doing his part for the end of season montage with that spin and save. Just calm, cool, and collected when he did that and saved it and just went off on his merry way and had some excellent wheel-to-wheel battles with the Williams as well, down a bit further down the order when he was fighting the way back through. And I think that going back to Alpine and Colapinto and Hamilton, I think the difference there was, Sainz was on the radio having a bit of a disagreement with his racing etiquette, let's say. But it was hard, clean, fair racing between the two Williams and Verstappen. It was very nip and tuck at points, but it was just on the right side of the line, whereas Colapinto just drove into Lewis. And you go, there is a big difference there. So I think Verstappen, he knows, and obviously Sainz and Albon both know what he's like, both when they're in the same team as him and when they're not. So they kind of know what they can get away with, what they can't, and what they're willing to risk themselves, considering where they are in the pecking order. So P5 again, not too bad a recovery afterwards. I think it was ridiculous as well that we had to wait however long it was after the Grand Prix to find out about his 5-second penalty for the pit lane infringement. So again, it's either he did it or he didn't. You will supposedly have a remote base supporting you to check these sorts of things during the race. So because you're busy doing whatever it is you're doing, which is essentially just handing everything to these people, how did that not happen sooner? Ridiculous. I'm just glad it didn't impact the overall result for him, because it would just been yet another. It was ridiculous enough with Leclerc, but then for him to have that as well, if that had knocked him down a place or two, that would have just been just silly.
Yeah, because obviously the Grand Prix eventually started for us in the UK at 6 p.m, wasn't it? It was done by about 8:30. It wasn't until nearly 11:30 that we finally, a whole 3 hours of not Grand Prix later, that we finally got an answer to that. I stayed on the Sky feed, watched all the post-race bits, watched the Ted Kravitz notebook. I always enjoy the Ted Kravitz notebook because sometimes you get those penalties announced during Ted Kravitz's notebook about an hour after the Grand Prix. A further 2 hours later, we finally got that answer. I'm like,
even Ted's gone home at that point.
How tricky is it to figure out through the camera angles whether or not a driver drove over a line? This should not be hard in the technological age that Formula One exists in. But yeah, Red Bull's second phase coming off the line is tricky. The turbo doesn't spool well, and in a bid to fight it back, Max overdid his braking, fighting both Antonelli and Leclerc, plus defending from Norris. If you saw off the start, he makes that great sort of a very early getaway and then immediately moves right to cover Norris, gets dirty tyres.
Instinct from last year going, no.
Yeah, I'm not letting you through here. Moves over, gets on the marbles, dirty tyres now on the approach to turn one, where he's now also not only got to think about Antonelli, who'll be going for the outside, but Leclerc, who's now in the middle and stands to gain a lot, and still with Norris behind him. It's sort of
and then has to do with Hamilton on one side, Colapinto on the other as he's coming out of this whole thing and go, oh.
Yeah, it's a 4-into-1 moment that I think shows that Max can juggle that. Unfortunately, the car got away from under him. Very tricky to deploy the power up on the curbs. It's going before he even gets onto that curb, really. Great recovery of the spin. Doesn't overdo his tyres in that process, which is very good. But I think for Hadjar, overdriving the car and himself, breaking his steering, then clattering into the chicane under the overpass, clumsy. Max
got to saw F2 Hadjar for a minute there, didn't we?
Yeah. I broke the car, no. But yeah, Max
Monaco levels of anger.
Max isn't giving up. That tyre stint was Herculean. It was 50 laps on a set of hards almost, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah, seeing him still going for it at the end was a hugely positive sign. Still really chucking it into that final few moments. You're going, oh, that's a lot to put through those tyres. It was good from Verstappen this weekend.
Yeah, he knows how to deal with these kinds of tricky situations, so it's not too surprising, but it's always nice to get that reaffirmation of it when the opportunity is presented.
And then we get to 5th place in the constructors' standings. Alpine. Gasly qualified 9th, but unfortunately DNF after being barrel rolled out the race by Liam Lawson. Colapinto would qualify 8th and finish 7th. Somehow, in 2 instances, moving up from his original locations due to penalties being handed out this weekend, because he should have qualified, 9th or 10th, and ended up moving up a bit.
Yeah, he just kind of, again, hoped no one would notice that he was there. Lewis definitely did, and then just shuffled up the order accordingly and gets points in the same way that I think he was holding on for dear life back in China. He was having to fight the Haas and Gasly, I think, to keep onto his position, and maybe one of the Audis. But we're just kind of like, please don't notice I'm here. Please don't notice I'm here. I desperately want points. Just the 1 point. I just want one.
Just one. That'll get the guy off my back. But 7th.
Yeah. And it just reminded me of a bit of Lance Stroll in terms of he woke up, remembered he was a racing driver, and went and performed. But I don't know if this is going to be a consistent thing or not, or if it'll go back to normal in Canada and he'll be down in something like 18th place. It's just very interesting to see, though, what Alpine, as a team with a car powered by Mercedes, are now capable of. The difference from one year to the next is quite staggering. We'll talk about Gasly a bit more later, I feel like, but that, for me, felt like just a very unfortunate racing incident. And again, with Gasly, it would have been nice to see what he could have done, though, because he and Lawson were racing clean and fair. So that would have been quite interesting to see where he would have fallen out into the grand scheme of things. Would he have been ahead of Colapinto by the end of it? You know, he started one place behind him, but you'd put money on him getting past, let's face it.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe he would have been P7, P6, depending. It would have been interesting to see if he would have been able to make inroads on Lewis or not.
For Colapinto as well, running an Evolution chassis this weekend as well. Not necessarily lighter than Gasly's, but the ballast mounting is different, giving him a bit better balance. And it looked quite a sort of comfortable car to drive. But yeah, I think the Mercedes power unit is interesting because Mercedes packaging is usually very good indeed. The way that the engine is sort of compressed and easy to place within the car. The Alpine power unit has always been quite a big unit, not necessarily fat or overweight. It's always been it's made weight, but it's always been a very cumbersome unit to package. Think back to how fat the top of the Alpines have been in previous years. They've had those giant air boxes, the big broad engine covers. It's a very big engine to try and fit in. I think now that Alpine have got this smaller package to work with and a very good technical department, they can focus and produce something that's a lot more competitive, and we're seeing that come through now, which is really promising. And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting seeing what Gasly can do as the season goes on. Bear in mind, this is only the 4th Grand Prix outing for this sort of setup of the team. I think Gasly's still got a lot to show for himself, and I think Colapinto does as well, to be fair. He's a hard one to race against, as most people haven't been wheel-to-wheel with him on track, much to the downfall of Hamilton this time round. Gasly's race ended early, but very glad he walked away. I think he did quite well there in that instance. I say this caution, I think Colapinto listens to this podcast and has bucked his ideas up. We've berated him a couple of times through the early part of this season compared to what Gasly's been able to achieve. And it was a solid sprint race and finished near the points for him as well. But a great Grand Prix, crossing the line to finish his personal best to this point, and then bumped up to a new one with that Leclerc penalty.
Look at Gasly as well. If you take the DNF in the race out of the way, every other race he scored points.
Yeah.
So far this season. So he is just being Mr. Consistent. I mean, you have to get up to sort of Lewis, Charles, and the 2 Mercedes for the only other drivers that have scored points in every single Grand Prix. And sprint so far this season.
Yeah.
So for it to be Gasly in an Alpine is such a weird kind of hook to add on to the end of that list. But again, it shows kind of what he's capable of and what I'm hoping we see a bit more of him from. Because I think, where is he in the standings? He's P9, 1 point behind Behrman, and 10 points now behind Verstappen. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to get higher than 8th by the end of the season if things keep tracking the way they are. I mean, you've got to assume that Hadjar's coming back at some point. He just had a very unfortunate sort of season in that regard. But again, maybe the second seat, but Gasly should be in the bottom end of the top 10 at the very least by the end of the season if he can keep this sort of performance up. And I don't know what we do with him after that. We talked about driver moves in other places and where would he go? Does he go back to Red Bull if Max leaves? Is that going to benefit him? What could he get out of that? But he's doing everything he would want to be doing to try and attract the attention maybe of someone else if Alpine can't get you to where you want to go, especially as he's, let's face it, in the twilight of his career at this point, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. He's made life in that sense a lot better for himself because he's been able to start putting in these performances, showing off his racecraft, his handicraft, and making those cases for himself on the track. This is where things start to get a bit vague. Haas are P6 in the constructors. Ollie Behrman qualified 12th, would finish 11th. Ocon would qualify 14th, would finish 13th. Fairly good.
Anonymous Grand Prix for them, really, wasn't it? Yeah. Just they were there. The livery still looks tremendous. I hesitate to go down that line of questioning, quite frankly, after a couple of years ago with Sauber, but at least they're sick. They're not at the bottom, so that's helpful for them.
Yeah,
really not much to say there, unfortunately.
Yeah, inexpensive weekends, no big crashes, no parts losses. They got some data. I think they had upgrades running this weekend, so they've been able to look at how those responded.
Nothing went wrong.
Yeah.
Just nothing went right either.
Compared to when you look at the rest of the teams on this list, bar Williams, I think is a strong point, really. Next on that list, Racing Bulls. Lawson qualifies 11th, DNFs, and Arvid Lindblad qualifies 16th, finishes 14th. Very tricky to tell the story of Lindblad's race. By and large, kept his nose clean. I don't think he got a penalty for anything. I think he had a couple of infringements, maybe the odd investigation, but that was about it. Lawson, for me, it was
really put it together, unfortunately, Lindblad. He's kind of, he had 14th in Japan and 12th in China. And again, I don't want to say he peaked in Australia with his 8th place, but it kind of eats a little bit maybe, and took advantage of the other situation going on that particular Grand Prix, whereas now things are not necessarily settling into their rhythm, but 14th is, it's still not bad as a rookie. You know, you're still finishing ahead of 2 Cadillacs, 2 Aston Martins, pretty much every weekend guaranteed. So you're probably not going to finish last as long as you finish the race. But a little bit like Haas, nothing's necessarily going extremely right for you at the moment, but nothing's tremendously wrong either. But that's not a bad thing for a rookie to have either.
Yeah. Again, he's just sort of finding his form, finding his feet, finding his consistency and his pace in a weekend. And that's good.
Do you wonder if we also expect too much from rookies because of people like Antonelli and Piastri in the last few years? You know, you get a lot of weight expectation on your shoulders. And he did all right in F2 last year, but he wasn't at the sharp end the entire time. So you wonder, are we expecting too much from him? But again, he's someone who I could see being in sport for a long time, so I'm not particularly worried about him. He's got the right head on his shoulders. So, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't move up with this sort of pressure to be a Wunderkind, so I don't think we need to be sort of expecting you banging in sort of like magical P6s out of nowhere. Lawson, on the other hand, a little bit clumsy into the hairpin for me. He was suffering a few issues, dropped off the pace a little bit while he recovered from those, and then I think just started to overdrive the car a little bit to try and recover and make up for that lost ground. And that's where we sort of saw him get onto a wet patch. We had him have that lock up into the hairpin, and as a result, sent Pierre Gasly barreling towards the squishy barriers. But yeah, a gearbox
and the fact that he had a gearbox failure. There's not really much you could do about that. So I think as much as the rest of it was a bit of a contribution, that's going to be the main thing, really, to preventing you from doing anything. Because again, they were, as I said earlier, they were racing nice and clean, fair and hard up to that point. So, you know, that at worst it would have been racing against him because there's no way Lawson was. We've seen Lawson have hard but fair racing. China last year is my favourite example of that. A bit of just rubbing the tyre alongside the side of whichever car is placed there. I think it might have been Bortoletto at that point. But he's a bit like Verstappen. He knows where the line is and he just stays on the right side of it. So for him to flip Gasly over like that, you know, it was, and again, such a small touch to do such a big flip as well was quite interesting.
At relatively low speeds because you're in the hairpin at that point. I think it's just the awkward angle where it's tyre on tyre. It so easily lifts.
It's the kind of thing where if you were trying to do it, it would be quite difficult to do it deliberately. But again, maybe with their curious special livery, yet another cursed special livery that we've seen.
Yeah, perhaps they won't run a special livery for them next season. We'll see how it pans out for them. But yeah, again, I don't think Lawson's got anything to prove, rather, and can just sort of move on to the next weekend and just sort of cope with it from there. He's had a fairly good...
Well, like you say, he's still P10 in the standings. Yeah. And he's doing decently. So, you know, he's 6 points off Gasly, 7 points off Behrman. And that's with the retirement. So that's not too shabby.
Not too shabby. Just below Racing Bulls sits Williams. Sainz qualified 13th and would finish 9th, while Albon would qualify 15th and finish 10th, picking up his first point of the season and a double points finish for Williams. Looks a lot better. Clearly, the spring break has paid dividends for them. They're a little bit lighter. They said they're moving in the right direction. They understand the aero package. They understand the drivetrain a lot more. So again, they've got another round of upgrades to come in Canada. Canada is usually a typical upgrading point as well. And we'll get to the upgrades when we get to Aston Martin and some of the interesting decisions made there. But usually we have upgrades arrive as early as Bahrain and then a second batch as early as Canada. And obviously we missed Bahrain, so Miami was the next point for them to come out. And then weirdly, the next round is Canada, where there'll already be scheduled upgrades and bits waiting for them at the circuit. So we'll see how that moves forward. Obviously, we saw Red Bull bringing out the Macarena ring along with Ferrari, which was funky. Also, did you notice how huge the slot gap was on that Red Bull when it activates as well?
Yeah, it did look massive in comparison to
rear downforce. It's so cool. But yeah, for Williams, good. I think much the same as Haas. Good.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a double points finish for them on my bingo card this weekend, but I will happily take it. It's Williams. You want to see them do well. We always say this, and the first three races were not what we wanted to see from them. So to go from absolutely nowhere to double points, even if it is P9 and P10, you'll take it and you'll run with it a country mile. So happy, take it, run.
Because there's another, 5 teams that did not score any points this weekend. So, yeah, or at least for the
Here's 3 of them now.
Yeah. Here's 3 of them now. Audi. Hulkenberg qualified 10th, would not finish the race. Bortoletto would qualify 21st and finish 12th. Rough weekend for them overall. 2 fires hampering progress, costing them a lot of parts, time and money. The car still looks a little unproven at points. However, Bortoletto's pace in the race is sublime. The fact that he just sort of somehow ended up 12th.
It's one of those frustrating things that, we had this middle portion of the Grand Prix where seemingly nothing happened, and yet one thing must have happened, was Bortoletto climbing up the order. You don't just do that in one lap, unless you're Senna and Donington in 94, 93. I'd love to have seen that. Why did we not get to see that, race directors? I would very much appreciate you doing that next time. Unfortunate for Hulkenberg, but the qualifying performance for him, strong. I like that. 10th, it's kind of where you'd be hoping for him maybe on a good day. And it was a good day. It was just the wrong day was the good day. Again, not much else to say there, really. I think, again, they're a team that I'm not too worried about. They seem to just quietly go about their business, as we talked about before. And their results so far this year aren't terrible. Again, you think about the fact that they're essentially Sauber moving into deep water with a bunch of new stuff that they've got to figure out. So again, all things considered, not awful. They're world building still. They've got foundations, and I don't think whatever issue they're having here will be an issue they have in the future.
It's not even that they're Sauber moving into a new thing. They're very much just Audi, because it's new chassis, it's new aerodynamics.
In terms of Sauber, in terms of you've got a lot of the expectations and the personnel of it from there. But so it's kind of, we talked about it before. It's not coming in completely brand new, but it is at the same time. It's this weird thing. So you've got still that little bit of mindset of what you'd expect from them, but you also got to think about the Audi aspect of it, because it's not that anymore, it's that, but you're still thinking of them in that way, which also works. It's a bit of a contradictory thing. Yeah,
realistically, they're coming in about as brand new as Cadillac are, because they've got a load of people who've been in Formula One before in the team. But the problem they have is they have this expectation of people going, oh, well, it's Sauber. They sort of usually know what they're up to anyway, so they should be good. So they've got this added pressure, whereas everyone sort of gives Cadillac a bit of a leeway because they're complete rookies at this. Whereas everyone goes sort of...
Well, because with Cadillac, it's all the people that have worked there before, but they've not all been together.
Yeah.
Whereas Audi are one step ahead of them on that front.
Yeah. They've got a few bits of an advantage because they sort of have already been a team before, a team of people, but not this team and not working under these regulations. It's all very tricky to pick apart as to what bit is so sort of tied to their performance and what bit of it is just a practicality. But again, it shows that they've got points on the board, which is more than can be said for the next 2. First of which is
one of which we're more sympathetic to than the other.
The first of which is Cadillac. Bottas qualifies 19th, finishes 18th. Perez qualifies 20th, finishes P16. It's solid driving. The car is there a bit more. Neither driver seems too upset about their weekends either, which is really interesting. They both seem quite sort of buoyed.
Perez in particular, which I quite like after how the season started and how he was reacting to stuff. I'm kind of hoping someone to talk to him in the spring break and just temper your expectations a little bit, maybe.
Yeah,
go hang out with Bottas for a bit. Go have a beer with him. Sit down, have a chat, get it out of your system, and then come to Miami and just be cool, kid.
Also, I think they might have mentioned to him that Colton Herta is probably going to do a second year in Formula 2. You're all right for a little bit longer. And yeah, it's just one of those things where you sort of look at it and go, okay, good. We're heading in the right direction. We're going to get that result sometime this season. It'll be the latter half of the season. It'll be
again. I like that Cota and Vegas are towards the end of the season because there is more potential for those two races.
I can certainly see them going well
than Miami.
I think certainly at Cota, because it's such a typical race circuit. You've got the big runoffs. You've got the room to sort of push it and make those exceptions. It's going to behave like
I worry with Vegas that because of their livery, they might literally be a dark horse at point because you might just not see typically then out of nowhere a Cadillac like Jesus.
Yeah, what was that? Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, Cadillac so far so good. It's not great, but it's good. Not bad.
Could be worse.
Yeah, could be worse. You could be Aston Martin, who at this point this weekend, the entire F2 grid was quicker than the Aston Martin. I think it was the sprint races. The Formula 2 cars were quicker.
Amusingly, Mary Boyer, as you pointed out over the weekend, Alonso's driver was quicker than Alonso was.
Yes, yeah, he was the fastest Aston Martin match driver this weekend. One does question whether this is just a money laundering front for Lawrence Stroll, because a huge gap in the season and you've brought no upgrades. Allegedly this is a money laundering front for Lawrence Stroll. Huge gap in the season. You've brought no upgrades. Bahrain, like we said, is usually the spot for the first batch of upgrades. Surely you would have brought them with you here, or are you just hanging on to Canada? Especially as it's odd. I don't get it. You're so far off the pace. You bring no
only team I saw on soft tyres during the Grand Prix as well.
Yeah.
And questioning, are you doing another testing session?
Yeah, like it must suck as a fan of Aston Martin to just sort of wake up and go, oh no, it's a Grand Prix weekend. We're going to be P15, P17, admittedly.
You kind of hope that when Amazon unveils the next James Bond, they do a sort of montage where you don't see the face until the very end, and it's just going through the Aston Martin to a factory, just getting rid of all the people that are clearly not helping, moving all this forward. Just goes right.
You're following Bond.
I'm here to bring things back to where they should be.
You're following Bond from behind, killing people. I thought when you said sort of slowly revealing it to then his face, I was thinking more like Naked Attraction is James Bond in a box, just slowly sort of with a curtain being lifted around.
That's two very different approaches there. That's why you're definitely not being in charge of the Bond franchise at any point in time.
Yeah, that's why Barbara Broccoli did not give me the rights to the James Bond franchise. But yeah, Aston Martin.
They both finished the race. The second race in a row.
Yeah, this is very good for them.
Japan they didn't. Never mind. Stroll. Yeah. Damn it, Stroll.
Next section.
We'll try again in Canada.
Try again. His home Grand Prix. Maybe he will. Who knows? We've got Formula 2 in Canada though, so they might be slower than Formula 2 again. Who knows? Is Canada a sprint weekend as well?
Yes.
Oh, great! So we have got a chance for Formula 2 to somehow be quicker than all of Formula 2. I should add, it's not just like Mary Boyer or like the front guys in Formula 2.
And there are some drivers in Formula 2 that you are going really M2.
Yes, yeah. M2. John Bennett, yes, yeah. Anyway, next section of the podcast: winners and spinners. Thiemo, your winner, please.
I had a bit of trouble and then I realised Williams got double points. I'm just going to go with Williams because I don't know when that's going to happen again this season. I'm not yet firm in my belief that they can repeat this consistently, so I'm going to do it now while I can.
Reasonable. I am going to go for Kimi Antonelli because he just looked imperious. You could not get close to him this weekend, and I think that's going to be tricky.
Unless you were MBS, in which case you did, but it looked more like a weird tribute to Voldemort and Malfoy from the Pianos that no one wanted.
Yeah, it was weird. Then he emptied a bottle of water on him. I was like, why? What have you done that
Did you
for?
see his mother's reaction afterwards? That was kind of everyone agrees with your facial reaction.
Yeah,
Kind of,
just sort of weird. Please leave my son alone. He's a minor in this country. Especially in the country they're stood in, that is a minor.
Well, there's plenty I could say on that one about how that's one way or the other in terms of being problematic, but I won't.
However, Mohammed bin Salman also saying this weekend that we will be going back to V8s.
He said that several times before, and I wonder how much he already feels threatened by Anthony Hamilton and
Yeah,
his own racing series, and how
yeah.
much he just wants friends.
Maybe he's just lonely. Mohammed bin lonely.
I know why we're going back to Turkey, by the way, though.
Yes.
You see his hair?
Uh, mm, yeah,
That's probably why we're going back to Turkey.
yeah. Um, mm, maybe we'll see. For me though, before we get too sidetracked, a winner for me, yeah,
You said
Antonelli.
Antonelli
Yeah.
already.
Yeah. Spinners though, Thiemo.
Stewards,
Yeah.
easy.
Dyer. What were you doing this weekend?
Not
Were they just
stewarding.
were they waiting for the highlights package to come out on Channel 4 before they started doing any work?
I mean, I could understand that. Great stuff, but
Yeah.
you'd kind of hope that they would watch that and go, wait, stewards are making decisions. Oh, yes,
That's
I knew
us.
we forgot to do something.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, they're sitting there going, "Oh, well, they're saying all this stuff about the stewards not making. Oh, that's us. Shoot." Yeah, I agree that the stewards did very badly this weekend. I'm also going to say Aston Martin's technical department for where are your upgrades, my guys? Everyone else even bought small upgrades. Even Mercedes brought just a little bit because they were like, "Yeah, we're just going to wait."
You'd either do a bunch of people standing outside the factory at Aston Martin with all the bits going. They said they were sending a van, right?
Yeah, were we supposed to organise shipping for this, or were they organising shipping for this? Someone's bungled up here. They're waiting for like a DPD guy to come and do like a scan and collect or something. But yeah, for me, Spinners, Aston Martin. Predictions, 1 point for me for Antonelli pole position. No points for anything else, for anyone. Norris got the fastest lap, which we did not predict. And I overstretched my Colapinto prediction. If I'd left it as Colapinto points, I'd have been fine. I'd gone Colapinto top 6, which we thought was ambitious.
It was, because he didn't get it.
But it certainly wasn't rubbish. He got P7, which is, yeah, a sour pill for me to swallow. But anyway, I'll just give it a quick refresh. We still do not have the official fantasy review yet, because it's all still provisional points. Maybe the stewards
are in charge.
Stewards are in charge. Yeah. That's why we've got no fantasy F1 review for you at the moment, which brings us nicely then to the conclusion of this week's episode of the Undercut Podcast. We'll be back soon to give you a preview of the Canadian Grand Prix. Until then, if people want more from you, Thiemo, where can you be found?
This week, you can find me over on Panic Chronicle, where I've got a key takeaways article about Formula 2 in Miami, and I've also got a tribute article for Ayrton Senna over on Paddock Influence on the curbs for everything else.
Lovely stuff. And if you want more from me, you can find me on the internet as at Jesse on Cars on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And of course, you can find me writing for Classic Car Weekly. We've got a new issue out that'll be out on Wednesday. You might be able to, if you listen to this quickly, pick up the last copies of the bumper issue we released last weekend with coverage from Driver Day and a brilliant piece I put together celebrating four-wheeled Morgans at 90. And if you're out and about this weekend coming, I'm at Retro Rides down at Goodwood Motor Circuit. I'll be there with some friends and some interesting cars, so come say hello. We'll be having great laughs and many shenanigans and beers as well. So, yeah, well worth the adventure down to Goodwood. I think there are still a few day tickets available, so come say hello. There's no racing, you might as well. Other than that, we'll be back soon with a preview for the Canadian Grand Prix and no doubt some conversation around IndyCar as well.